Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Jamaican High Commission. It is my pleasure to extend to you a warm welcome as we celebrate today with millions around the world in celebrating International Women's Day 2023. The theme for this year is Embrace Equity. According to the organizers of the International Women's Day, to embrace equity means to understand the journey required to achieve women's equality, to challenge gender stereotypes, call out discrimination, draw attention to bias, and seek out inclusion. Jamaican women and women of Jamaican heritage are not unfamiliar and have spent much of their lives fighting in this regard to attain gender equality and gender equity. One of our national heroes, Nanny of the Maroons, is well known in folklore for her contribution as a woman and using the tools that God equipped her with as a woman to do what she could in pursuit of the betterment of her people and for women generally. We also have historical figures that we have learned about throughout our years in school, Jamaican women who have gone on Jamaican women who have gone on to do many phenomenal things to achieve unexpected and awesome achievements throughout the world in various fields. This evening, we have with us a few of those women whom I will not introduce. We will introduce later on in the program, but rest assured that you'll be able to meet some of those women this evening who have within their various fields that are predominantly dominated by males. And in those fields, they have tried their best and have made headway in ensuring that women in those fields are recognized and treated equally and equitably. And so without going further and taking up too much more of your time, I am now going to turn over this evening's proceedings to my colleague, Ms. Anne-Marie Pinckney, who will then guide us through the rest of the program. Thank you for being here and do enjoy and be educated and informed. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Women's Day. It is my pleasure to introduce our host for this evening, Evadne Campbell, MBE. Evadne Campbell is the Managing Director and co-founder of Shiloh PR. She was awarded an MBE by the Queen in 1994 for her services to the African and Caribbean communities in Gloucester, following her dedication to charity work. A former BBC broadcast journalist, Evadne has worked in a variety of roles, including radio presenting and as a news reporter for TV and radio. Evadne is also author of the book, How to Carry Out Media Interviews, and as an international speaker and trainer who has had engagements across West Africa, the Caribbean, the UK, and Europe. Evadne can be frequently seen on mainstream media, including BBC Radio and TV, Channel 5 News, as well as numerous radio stations, newspapers, and magazines. She is listed as one of the UK's 100 most influential entrepreneurs, featured in the Women in PR 45 over 45 2022 list, and was the Wintrade President Awards winner 2019. Evadne is an ambassador for Women in PR and also a judge for the Great British Entrepreneur Awards and the Royal Television Society Journalism Awards. Evadne is also a visiting lecturer at the University of Bedfordshire, Luton, and the University College London. Evadne, thank you.
Every time I hear bios, I always wish they'd call me so I can cut it down considerably. But thank you for that. And it is such a pleasure to be here to host this International Women's Day. And talking about bios, honestly, I feel humbled, honored, privileged to be introducing these three incredible women. And when you hear what they have done and achieved, I mean, it's just amazing. So I'm gonna, let me just tell you that later on, I've got some questions that I'm going to ask, but I'm also going to encourage you all, whether you are watching online or here with us, to have your questions ready, because we'll be happy to ask the questions of the ladies later on. But before we go on, I'm going to start off by doing an intro and embarrass them now with their long bio. So starting off on my right here is Janet Hills. Janet retired as a detective sergeant from the Metropolitan Police Service in August 2021, after serving 30 years. Janet spent most of her service as a career detective, working mainly within the Criminal Investigation Department. She has been involved in murders, investigating not her being a murderer, just investigating the robbery and burglary squad and specialist operations. In 1999, after the recommendations from the Macpherson inquiry, Janet was one of the first officers to become a family liaison officer. This was a key recommendation from the report in order to build trust and confidence, particularly within the African Caribbean community. In 2013, Janet became the first female chair of the Metropolitan Black Police Association. The association was set up in 1994 and was the first staff support network for officers and staff from an African, Caribbean, and Asian background. In 2015, Janet was elected as the president of the National Black Police Association, which represents the 43 forces within England and Wales. It also includes Scotland, Northern Ireland, and the British Transport Police. In the 2021 New Year's Honours List, Janet was awarded an MBE for her services to policing and the community. In retirement, I don't know if anyone ever retires, Janet spends her time giving back to the community. She hasn't retired. She is the non-executive trustee with St. Giles and co-chair of governors at Trinity Church of England School in Lewisham. Last year, Janet was awarded an honorary law fellowship from the University of East London and sits on the advisory board, which gives advice on the content of the modules and career advice to students. Janet is also one of the deputy chairs of the London Drug Commission. Now you understand why I say no one retires. Can we just have an applause for Janet? We'll find out a little bit more about Janet later on, and I hope things that aren't these kind of formal, wonderful, we just want to get to know who Janet is, and we'll find that out later on. And next to Janet is Angela Rainford. Angela is the founder of Solico, and you have to help, excuse if I mispronounce your next one, and Recamineer?
Perfect.
Frontier Ventures. Recamineer co-developed one of the largest solar plants in the Caribbean and the largest in Jamaica. Prior to this, Angela worked at Goldman Sachs in the merchant banking division, principal investment area in London and New York. Prior to joining Goldman, she worked as part of the portfolio team at Sterling Samos, a private investment management firm specialized in alternative and multi-asset investment solutions. She began her career as a business analyst at McKinsey & Company in New York. Angela has served as an advisor to Helios Investment Partners, a £3 billion private equity fund based in London, focused on investments in Africa. She has also served on the board of directors for GK Capital Management, the financial advisory and investment arm of Grace Kennedy Group, and currently is the director of Panjam Investment Limited, GK UK Foods, and JN Money Services, a subsidiary of Jamaican National Banking Building Society. Angela is also a trustee of the Caribbean Board of the Nature Conservation. Oh my goodness, what a difference. Nature Conservancy. Angela holds an MBE from Harvard Business School and MPhil, is that what they say? MPhil in Development Studies from the University of Cambridge. She also graduated with a BA magna cum laude in government from Harvard College. Angela has traveled to 70 countries and lived on 3 continents. She is a keen motorcyclist, classical pianist, and has her private pilot license. She has also climbed 3 of the 7 summits. Oh my gosh. I mean, now you see why I said I was humbled, privileged, and I mean, I'm in awe of these women and what they have achieved. And I'm even prouder because they're of Jamaican extraction. So that just, as far as I'm concerned, that sums it up, you know. Being Jamaican and have achieved so much is just phenomenal. And last but by no means least is Cordella Bart Stewart. Cordella Bart Stewart is an immigration and asylum law specialist with an interest in equality and human rights. She founded Stewart & Co Solicitors in North London in 1990, where she is now a consultant. Cordella also works as a fee-paid judge in the Immigration and Asylum Tribunal. She is a member of the Solicitors Regulation Authority Working Group on the Solicitors Qualifying Examination and other policy issues. Cordella is considered a thought leader and speaker on equality and human rights. Cordella is a founding member and director of the Black Solicitors Network, a companion of the Chartered Management Institute and a director of Impress, the independent monitor of the press. She is a former independent governor of Staffordshire University, which awarded her an honorary doctorate. In 2014, Cordella was shortlisted for Legal Personality of the Year in the Law Society Awards. In 2021, New Year's Honors List, she was awarded an OBE for her service to the legal profession and voluntary service to diversity and education. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, today couldn't have been a better day to celebrate you phenomenal women, International Women's Day. And as I say, just to remind you that please, I'm going to ask some questions, but I'm sure you will have lots of questions. Vivian will be taking all the questions from those that come online. But if there are any questions in here, if you just indicate at the end, and Vivian will make sure that they are asked. Now, wow. Our theme is embrace equity. This is a great statement, given these amazing women's experience. And if I can start with you, Angela, before your current role, you held positions with some impressive organizations, something we will discuss a bit later on when we ask you more about yourself. But for this, the issue of equity and equality, and we're going to, I mean, I'm so glad that we had a breakdown of the difference, but I think we need to talk about both equity, which is the theme for International Women's Day or month for some of us. But for this issue of equality, this must have been a consideration in banking, especially investment banking and merchant banking. They're both very, very male-dominated sectors. So as a woman and one on the top of that profession, and not only that, the intersection of being a Black woman, and this applies to you all, not only were you are women, which means we deal with all sorts of issues, you're Black women, which add on top of that issues around equity and equality. So what does this whole embracing equity means for you?
So I guess for me, maybe I'll start off by saying that when I left Goldman, it was a difficult decision. But when I walked out, I left with basically half of the female population and about a third of people of color. So when I worked in banking and I was in London, New York actually had a bit more diversity. Working on it. And so the efforts that the firm made, there were still not many people who looked like me or looked like us. And to the point where even in one of my first days working on the floor, one of the delivery guys came by and he was a Black man. He worked for DHL, he was a courier, and he had a document. And he came to me and he said, where can I leave the packages? And one of the assistants yelled over to him, an English lady, and she said, she's not an assistant, she's a banker. And so he basically then took the document and went over and she's like, I'll take the documents. And then one other, because I like stories, anecdotes, because that kind of tells you, paints the picture. One other, I remember my first day, this was in New York, my first day starting at Goldman. And I arrived early, you have to try to work extra hard, be extra good, make that extra effort, both as a woman and a woman of color. And one of the guys walked in. I had worked there the summer before. I was given an offer to come back, and a gentleman walked in, and he said, the food, is the food ready? And I was really hurt because I was in my fine suit. I spent all that time trying to look the part, and I didn't say anything. Actually, one of the senior partners walked in, and he walked in, and he said, Angela, it's so good to see you again. And this is one of the senior guys at the firm. And he's like, I'm very happy that you're a member of the associate class. And that guy, I didn't have to say anything. He was so severely embarrassed and humbled. And so I remember those two experiences. So coming back to your question, what does that mean to me? I think what it means to me is being in a place where you don't really see, you can never fully, I don't believe you can never fully see someone's race, where they come from, the cultural richness, because if you completely wipe that out, then we're all the same. And I think the world is a very interesting place by virtue of us having people who are not all the same, whether by gender or by race or national. Ensure we have as much as possible similar opportunities in society. And the last thing I'll leave, and I'm desperate to hear from these two, because I'm so impressed to be even amongst you, is that even when I went to Harvard, and I will say I'm pretty certain I was a product of affirmative action, and I'm not ashamed to say it. And affirmative action for me at the time, even one of my professors, he was anti-affirmative action, but it was a good debate for us to have. And one of the key messages is, look, it's not about saying that we're all equal, but think about the differences in opportunities that different persons have had. And it's maybe because of race or gender, but bearing that in mind and giving us the equal chance to shine, I think is something that's super important. And that's kind of what it means to me.
I want to come back to this whole affirmative action, because of course we don't have that in this country. But I want to discuss it because I think a lot of people mix up affirmative action and recognizing it's about balance and about redressing the balance. So, but we can come back to that. But Janet, the same, listening to Angela, I'm conscious that services, I think you think about the Met, Black woman having achieved what you have gone to, I mean, what was that? If this whole, let's get back and keep the question about embracing equity.
So for me in policing, when I joined back in 1991, it was very white.
Still white.
Yeah, male, male, pale. Yeah, that was the environment that I joined in. And again, when I look at it now, over the 30 years, it has made considerable. I think now women in policing are fantastic. It's awesome that women are able to be involved in policing in a major way and now shaping the culture of policing. However, what I will say about that is that when I look at the representation of women, I don't see many women that look like me. So even though gender equality have been making massive strides, that hasn't been equal for all women. Because if it was, we would see the same benefits applied to women of an African, Caribbean or Asian background, and we're not seeing that. And that's, for me, where the equity aspect comes in. Because in terms of equality, what you have is everyone being treated the same, everyone being treated fairly. Equity is, in order to treat someone fairly, you have to treat them differently. You have to treat them according to their needs. And that is what people don't see. They don't see the intersections. They don't see the disadvantage for Black women who are women. But the question I usually ask is, do you see me as a Black woman or a woman that happens to be Black? Because there's a difference in the way in which you get treated. And that's the key thing for me. And throughout my career in policing, that has always been a message that I try to drive forward, because it's so easy. You know, people will say, well, why are we celebrating International Women's Day? Why are we celebrating Women's Day at all? I'm having my garden done at the minute, and I had the landscaper in, and I said, look, I've been really busy today because I needed to meet up with him. And I said, you know, I've been celebrating International Women's Day, and he laughed so loudly and so hard. I nearly had to catch him up. What's happening? But it's like, oh, well, we don't have a Men's Day.
I was waiting for that one.
It's exactly how it's still perceived. And this is 2023, where actually women's achievements have been underplayed, have been overwritten in history in terms of our contribution. So I think it's really important that we celebrate International Women's Day, but also we understand the difference between that equality and equity and how it impacts across all of the strands, not just the gender strands.
I'm sorry, one thing that always annoys me about these things, you never have enough time. There's so much that you want to get into that you never have enough time. Cordana, we've moved from the police force into the judiciary. Now, you really at the top of your game when it comes to that, but you have a speciality in immigration law, and those are the kind of areas that we think about a lot when we think about how you treat people equally and fairly and justly. What does this embracing equity mean for you?
Well, I think as a lawyer, so equity is a concept that lawyers study. So it's intrinsic in theory to lawyers, in that equity is about fairness. But it is really how you achieve, it is how you achieve fairness. There is, we used to, back in the day, I think when we started talking, before we started talking about diversity and inclusion and everything else, we used to talk about equal opportunities. And but equal opportunities didn't actually get us very far, because it didn't take into account that we might all be on put on the same starting line to run the race, but there are actual factors that really stop us from progressing. So in terms of moving on and talking about equity, it is dealing with often it's not just things about us, it's about women. I mean, as a Black woman in the judiciary, the data shows I am the least likely person to be a judge. That's a fact. And their data, that is actually from the Ministry of Justice, that that's what it shows, least likely in the whole of the UK. But so there are those factors that you have to take into account, but you also then have to look at the structural things that have prevented, that means that I am least likely and women like me are least likely, and what can be done, because I don't see why I should have to change in order to get to where I want to be. I ought to be able to do the same as other people have done. So I think in terms of embracing equity, I do think also we need to be focusing on breaking down those structural barriers that actually prevent women from achieving their full potential. And in answer to my stock answer to the men who query International Women's Day is that you have 365 days a year, just give us one, right?
Well, you can jump to the very interesting, so that's answered, why do we need International Women's Day? Just in quickly, I mean, because Vivian, have we got any questions? I'd like to make sure people get their chance to ask any questions before I get.
There's one that was, there are two actually.
Okay.
One to Janet. Sorry, yes, to Janet. It says, do you see being a police officer as a betrayal of not only your race, but also your gender because of the treatment of people of color and women by the police in light of recent developments in the metropolitan?
I was good.
Especially.
Yes, sorry, I would have asked you that, but maybe not quite as openly as they have done. But the police haven't exactly covered themselves in glory where women are concerned just recently.
No,
So,
they've not got a very good track record at all. But in answer to the question, I don't see it as a betrayal. I see it as actually trying to bridge that gap, to try and understand from both sides, because at the end of the day, the grass is always looks green on the other side. But unless you're on the other side to actually experience what that is like and to know, to make those changes so that everything is right for people to be joining, then people will always have that view from an outside perspective, what it is like. As Cordelia was saying about changing, I didn't change who I was to join the police. Yeah, I've still, lived my life. I've still got my culture. I still understand where I'm coming from. That hasn't changed about me. What has changed about me is my understanding of the world and some of the crossover skills that I've learned in policing that I can use in my community and help my community to be better, to have a better understanding of policing and what goes on, because it's all shrouded in mystery, because we don't know anyone. When I think about the amount of young people that have never met a police officer, that there's no one in their family, there's no one in their network or close friends that have met a police officer, so therefore can ask those questions. And that's what's so key about the Metropolitan Black Police Association. We are members of the staff support group that actually represent our communities. So there's always those links that will help communities to understand what goes on and what they can do if there are issues, because there is a big thing about Black people going to police and being an informer and all these other things that go with it, but we still need them in society. And the BPA allows for that access for them to come and to find out, young people and violent crime, all of these things, young people in drugs. It's like, as a parent, where do you go? Who do you turn to? You can't directly go to the police because you're fearful that the police will act in a different way. And that's why the BPA is so key in trying to bridge that gap and have those conversations with our communities that allows them and informs them so that they can do better for themselves. So I hope that answers the question.
I hope so.
There was a second question.
Oh, sorry, Angela wants to add something.
I just wanted to add something to what Jeanette said, because it really resonated even in the corporate world. because representation is so key in the boardroom, because these are where the decisions get made. And I've heard before where there's one board which I became a part of, and the entire board, more or less, were white men. And so we're trying to increase the diversity, and sometimes people are like, but why are you on that board? They don't, I said, that's precisely why you need someone like to represent being a woman or being a person of color on those boards. So I definitely don't see it as a betrayal, because if you're not at the table, if you don't have a seat at the table, how are you going to influence change?
You're on the menu.
And I'm sure.
You're on the menu. Yes. Yeah.
Just before I take the second question, Vivian, I wanted to move on, and that really is triggered by this question about betrayal. Now, as a woman, and we've now got a woman Home Secretary who was in the news today, celebrating and talking about the new immigration bill or illegal migrant bill. As someone with a passion for immigration and asylum, what are your, and without getting too political, but I can't not ask you about this.
My passion is for human rights and equality and education as well, because I think it's important that we do educate ourselves as well. And so that's a prerequisite for managing to get on in this society as well. But it's about human rights. And as a judge, you have to understand that I have a particular role as a judge, and I can't make pronouncements in terms of what I think about politics. I can just say that in general terms, the United Kingdom, as is said by everybody, has a proud record when it comes to welcoming people to these shores, and is signatory, not only signatory, helped to actually write, to author a number of instruments at the end of World War II. And the reason for that was want to prevent those sort of atrocities ever happening again. That's the intent behind the Refugee Convention. It's the intent behind the European Convention on Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. It's its full title. It's human rights and fundamental freedoms that an orderly society should try to adhere to. And so it would be rather unfortunate if the United Kingdom was to derogate from that.
Do you think it, because I was interested this morning with some of the questions that were put to Suella Braverman, sorry, I have to think to make sure I give her correct name, as we've already discussed what I generally might refer to her as, so I wanted to make sure. Do you think that today being International Women's Day, and we've heard her views on migration, and someone as a woman saying, you know, her dream was to see a plane load of people at Christmas going to Rwanda. Are we shocked because she's a woman, or because she said something that we may feel is is kind of a bit inhumane, or if a man had said that, would we have had the same level of shock?
I don't think the shock is because of her gender. I don't. I think it is something. I think the shock is in terms of basic humanity and how we treat other people and the respect that we have for other people. And I think what often happens when we talk about migration, refugees, which are a completely different concept. The bill is called the Illegal Migration Bill, but it's actually about refugees, and refugees are a distinct, separate concept. And we often forget, I think, that we're just talking about human beings who, like us, a lot of us, I wasn't born in this country. I was brought here by my parents. I assume that they brought me for a better life and for opportunities. And that's what people are generally seeking when they migrate. And in terms of the people speaking in that sort of way, they're also migrants. And so perhaps that's something they ought to consider.
Vivian, your next question.
Yeah, the second question is from Angela to Angela. And it's also surprising to all of the women because of your role and what you're doing. But how do you find the time to do all that you do? It's aimed at Angela because we're here now signing up.
Feminist summit. Feminist summit.
Whether you have family, other commitment, but also making your mark in the roles that you have with all of the other issues you have to deal with that possibly a man would not have to face.
Okay, so on that point, having a supportive husband is definitely key, having a supportive partner, just as many successful men have a supportive husband or wife. I think how I try to handle it to the best that I can, it's never perfect, is being very efficient and absolutely brutal with my time management. So if something is not, I prioritize. If something's not important, I will deprioritize it. I'll focus on the things that have to get done. And I also try to delegate. No person is on their own, so you need a team. So I will delegate tasks as much as possible, and particularly the tasks which are less important to me, or the ones where I don't believe for my family or for myself, I'm getting the fulfillment, or for my business or for my colleagues, then I definitely try to shift those tasks, because you only have 24 hours in a day, billionaire or pauper, same number of minutes you have in the day. You need to sleep for a certain period of time. And then there are activities that you want to do, and then there's obligations and work that you have to do. So when I start each day, I guess my one, if it were a tip, or at least it works for me, is I always write down what are the things I need to achieve today. So I have a little scrap piece of paper. I'll write down a few things. It can't be a massive laundry list. And I love crossing off. I get such pleasure from crossing off. But that's what I would say. And in terms of the travel and other activities, that's gathered over, God has given me the blessing where I've had time, in terms of I'm still alive. I hope to live for a lot longer. But whenever I have a break where I can make the most of something, I try to travel or do things I enjoy. And that's how I've been able to maximize it.
Climb mountains. Janet, no, I mean, I read out the whole list of things. That's why I said,
Yeah,
you're not retired. You say you're retired, but you're not. So how do you do that? How do you
So
prioritize?
when I was working, I had a office with some staff who are here today, actually. So I was their boss. So yeah, and they would manage my diary. So they would make sure that everything was ticked off and I got where I needed to be. And now that I don't have that, I think one of their biggest criticisms of me was that I needed to learn to say no. And coming away from that organization of having someone look after your diary, I am in that situation where I need to learn to say no. I really do need to learn to say no, because what happens then is that you become overcommitted, and you're not achieving anything by that. So that's in terms of now I've reached my limits of where I can sort of like try and achieve everything. But I think you're right, you do need to have a focus, you need to be brutal with your time, and you need to, again, just apply yourself. And even though I make my lists, which I do, seriously,
They're not crossing.
seriously, I try to cross them, but at the end of the day, I'm like, why are you still there? Why are you still on my list? It's so challenging. But yeah, it's something that I'm still learning.
I think for me, I find that the community puts a lot of pressure because they ask you to do, especially at periods like these, International Women's Day, I get asked, and I'm sure you all do, to do so many things. And what each organization or each individual doesn't recognize is that they're just one of the many that are asking you. And therefore, if you say no, I was, and I'm learning, and I've really learned to say no without being racked with guilt.
Yes.
And recognizing that I can only do so much, and I also need to protect my own mental health and my own well-being. But as Black people in particular, you feel an added pressure that you need to give back to your community. So when they ask you to do something, and invariably if it's free, and you have to say no, it's
Yeah,
a hard
it-
one. So
it's
I don't
challenging.
know, you're also a governor, and also, how do you do it? How do you manage your time?
I've always been all right with time management because I mean, as a lawyer, you're diary based anyway. So I've always sort of worked to the diary. And also you work in units of time because you charge by units of 6 minutes. Minutes of
I
time.
can try that.
And so I think, so for me, I think it's also, it's having that discipline. You do have to be disciplined. And say no to, and it is learning to say no. And if I don't think it's something I'm going to enjoy, then I would definitely say no. And I think that's one of the things as well, that you're thinking, oh, I have to do it because, no, you don't. I think it's that, but also delegation. I really do believe in the village and society and calling on each other rather than trying to do everything alone as well. And so
I'm just learning to say no
yeah.
without the guilt. I still say, I still get the guilt because I feel as if I ought to, and then and like you're now beginning to say, is it something that I really want to do?
Yes.
Because what I used to do is I'd be doing a whole host of stuff and then I'd resent myself for having said yes. So now I'm trying to manage that. Any questions from anyone in the audience before? Because we don't have a lot of time and I want to make sure I give you an opportunity. Oh, I'm okay? Good.
I've got one.
Yes, please.
What do you all do to look after your own mental health, well-being?
I'll kickstart. So there are a couple things. So one is I try desperately to carve out a rest day. Like I will say this one day is not a no work day. So much so that my assistant, who is amazing, she messages me on that day. I'm like, why are you messaging on that day? That's the day. So I try to just be religious about it, that one day of rest effectively. The other thing I do is I have, as you can see from my bio, I have hobbies and things I enjoy doing. So much so that we may need to add bird watching to it. I love nature. I love watching birds. I love playing the piano. I love just being, and music, listening to music, spending time with my family. So that for me is critical for my mental health. I need those moments of just break and calm.
Cordella?
I think it's just blocking out time. I mean, I think Mondays, I do not have anything in my diary on a Monday. It gives me the time then to think about what I'm going to do the rest of the week, but also it then means I can just do things spontaneously that day. And if it is that I just want to go to the theatre, I go to the cinema in the daytime on my own, if that's what I feel like, just doing something completely different and switching off and just taking that me time.
Janet, again from your staff, I wonder why. So
Again, they were very good in
Yeah.
blocking out. It was usually a Friday. They wouldn't put anything in my diary for a Friday. But again, I guess coming out of that environment, and it's not really, I guess, the answer to the question in terms of, but I do things that I enjoy. So I'm an avid netball coach. So whereas before at work, I always found, where did I find the time to work when I was doing so much netball? But now that I'm not working, it takes up literally 7 days. Every day is a netball day. And what I love about netball in particular is it's about empowering young women and girls in sport, and it's a team sport. So as a coach, I've spread myself over a number of clubs, just trying to do that empowerment through sport bit, which I really, really enjoy. And then I make sure, so maybe I might not have the day or the weekends, but in terms of quality time, I always ensure that, hubby and I are able to go away on quality, sort of like long weekends or quality holidays that actually, we can really enjoy that time. And then once that's finished, it's back, nose to the grindstone.
when you go away, do you take your phone, your laptop.
I'm a
you
nightmare.
don't want-
I'm a nightmare.
Yes,
Yes, I
see,
do.
so
I
you're
have.
not.
Yes, I know. I'm still not switched off. And yeah, that is very, very true. So yeah, and I think social media does a lot of that because you're
Yeah.
always wanting one to be
have a look.
nosy
Yeah.
and two to do your own post as well. So yeah, it's having that phone. But hubby does insist that when we're having a meal,
Good.
that
But
the
Phone goes away, good.
But I also think that in terms of your mental health, if you have to be enjoying what you're doing
Yeah.
as well. And so if it's less stressful and less of an issue if you're enjoying what you're
Yeah,
doing. So with me, if it's something that I think I'm not enjoying this anymore,
Yeah.
then I know you just stop it.
Yeah.
You had a question? Yeah.
My name is Tara Johnson. I sit on the Diversity Council. I have a question for Angela. It's not really
That's fine.
yeah, I just wanted to ask, I listened to some about alcohol in Jamaica, and I've listened as well to conversations about ways that different countries kind of find their landscape to welcome new life. And I wanted to know what were some of the challenges that you faced in establishing that solar farm, and how do you think that the government could change policy to kind of welcome the new?
I'll try to do it very quickly. So the reason why we're able to do the first project is because of government policy. So whilst I'd be the first one to point and say there are things that are missing, but hats off to the Jamaican government at that point in time. They made a regulatory change, which enabled private sector developers to develop projects, and they welcomed renewables. So they had a government tender. In terms of additional capacity, I think we have lagged over the last 6, 7, 8 years. We were actually at the forefront, and now we've fallen behind. There have been announcements that they're planning to do more, which I'm hoping. But I think everything I'm private sector, so we work within the realm of what the government sets and policy. So hopefully they will reset that mandate and push us forward and remove roadblocks around things like permitting and the usual just getting things done on the ground in Jamaica. It's not easy.
They've even got another. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
If you had to give a piece of advice to your younger self as you were setting out in your career after all the wisdom that you ladies have been, what would that advice be?
Have more,
Yeah,
have more confidence. I think the older you get and the more successful you become, is the more confident you become. However, I feel that if you had some of that confidence at an earlier stage, you'd have moved on much further, you'd have progressed more. And I think one of my first, Marcus Garvey, always says it best, and it is having that confidence in self, and then you're twice forward in the race of life. And I think it is that early confidence that pushes you further on.
I'm still learning, but I guess if I were to speak to my younger self, I would say, look, try perspective. I guess it kind of speeds into what Cordella is saying. You start to realize that the things that you think are the end of the world really just don't matter. So that's what I would say to my younger self. Do not, even though I'm happy where I am today, so I wouldn't want to completely change my younger self, but I would say don't stress. Try not to stress too much about the small things. They really, really don't matter. Life is much bigger than your career as well. So make time for the other things that matter. But I think if you don't focus on it as being so important, you actually relax more, you probably enjoy it more, and you're also willing to take more risk, both as a younger person and as a woman, right? Especially when you're trailblazing.
I read something some time ago, I probably got it all wrong, but it was something along the lines of, if in 5 years' time you won't remember it, and then it doesn't matter. And that's it, because I think it's that younger self, isn't it? Is what we are. Confidence as you've got older grows. I mean, now I couldn't care less. Whereas, I say what I have to say, and so be it. And even my daughter, who is so confident now, I'm like, I wish I had your confidence at that age. I wish I was as brave about going for things at that age. Now I do now try to live with this thing, feel the fear and do it anyway. So, but,
No,
Janet.
again, I can't disagree with what's been said already. You know, definitely would just say to my younger self, just go for it. You know, all of the failures that I've had in life have not been failures. They've just been lessons about how you can be better. And the thing is, you know, in terms of women and the imposter syndrome aspect, you know, we take it to heart. You know, our feelings are always part of all the decision making that we do. You know, when we decide to wear a tight dress or a short dress, do you know what I mean? All of that is emotional. It's attached to us. So for me, it would be, you know, just to go for it. Just go for it. And sometimes embrace. So what I would say to young people is that embrace the power within. So sometimes that power is a negative thing, but if you embrace it, you can use it actually to empower yourself to go and achieve whatever you want to, rather than using it as something that will hold you back.
Absolutely. Vivian, you had a question.
The question was very similar because someone said your panelists are all very successful women, but there are many women who have not reached their stage in their careers or in life. What would you say to them? How would you encourage them? Because there are many women who are doing basically minimum wage and are carers and are working in jobs like carers or on 0 hours contract. How would you encourage those women in terms of moving forward, becoming maybe confident, as you said?
So I guess it's just how you choose to measure success. So I've got to be honest, when I left school at 16, the plan wasn't to be sitting here in 40 odd years time. There wasn't the plan. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever worked to a plan. And sometimes people do work to a plan, there's nothing wrong with that. But also, if you don't work to plan, there's nothing wrong with that either. I think it's all about you and your ambition and about, you know, where you want to go. And I think just, again, having that courage to keep putting your foot forward, because there'll be things that, as I said, will have you sort of like crying and being emotional around, you know, just not turning out right for you. But actually know that, again, I have to say this, God has a plan. And that you can work to that, even though you can't see it as clearly as you would like to. That actually the fact that you can get up in the morning and you can give thanks for being in this space, that actually provides you with another opportunity to go about and achieve what you need to in life.
I think just to add to that, since we're in the Jamaican High Commission, in Jamaica now, there's this saying that I like when someone says, how, you know, they say, hi, how are you? They're like, midday.
Yes.
Midday. And so for me, midday is so key because you're in terms of measure of success, I agree with Janet, it depends on how you measure success. I joke sometimes, there's actually a photograph in my home office of a guy next to one of the push carts, since we're Jamaicans, I'll talk about push carts. So there's a push cart, the coconut guy, and he looks so bloody happy. And when I'm on my conference calls and I'm stressing over all these things, I look back at that photograph and I go, wow, who's really winning? You know, who is actually successful here? So I guess to the question around women who are in minimum wage, who are probably struggling, who are to define success by virtue of just your bank account or where you are in a career, I think is very short-sighted, because some of those guys on the street of Jamaica who just can say midaya and they're enjoying and they're happy, at the end of the day, that's kind of success, right? It's just being happy where you are with what you have and contentment. Because you could be one of the wealthiest persons in the world and you know they are. Right?
But I think, I mean, I've got a slightly different thought about it, because I think in terms of the question, I think it really takes us back to the theme of today, which is embracing equity. And so yes, we've done well, there's no doubt about it. But part of that is really from embracing opportunities and trying to find opportunities as well in things. And so it might, I mean, in terms of, yes, success is not necessarily measured in money, wealth, financial terms. But if you are unhappy, and some of the people will be unhappy, I think we do have to recognize that. And it is also then trying to encourage and to assist and to help and to give back and helping to empower those people to find a way to move on if that is what they want to do. If they're comfortable, fine. But I think, I mean, for me, as I said before, education is just the thing. It has always been the thing for me in terms of, because I know that's what got me to where I am. And I just, in terms of, sometimes people don't actually have access to information. And I think that's something, again, where we could help is giving access to information and just empowering people that way to just sort of think outside the box, maybe think outside of their environment and see what other things that they can do. I mean, in my profession, I mean, there is no upper limit to being a lawyer. And so you'll find, if you go into any university, you'll find people in their 50s or 60s or whatever, deciding at that stage, the opportunity is now for them to do what they want to do and move on. So I think there's also that as well, that I think certainly for me, it's been not settling not settling based on other people's expectations of me. It's what I can do to move myself forward.
I think that is so true. And mentioning education, what I wanted to say to anyone is that it's never too late. And I think sometimes we think that there are things that we've always wanted to do, but now it's too late, I'm too old. When my first degree, I was already married with 2 children and working full-time when I decided to go back to school and studied. And it took me a long time because I had to do it part-time. And then when I went to do my post-grad, I was the oldest one in the class. But, you know, it didn't matter. I'd never, like you, I didn't have plans as such. I grabbed opportunities as I went along. And I just think it's saying to people, it doesn't matter where you are now. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. All of these women didn't just get up one morning and they're at the top of their careers. So wherever you are, it's what you want to achieve and you can achieve it. Honestly, I am a product of adult education. I did it all when I was already an adult. And as I said, when I did my first degree, I had 2 young kids and I was doing a million things. I was involved in everything under the sun. I used to be a netball umpire and my kids would be in the pushchair in the cold. Because it's just, you can, and don't ever be put off. I often find when we talk about role models, they are people that look as if we cannot aspire to where they are. I mean, as I said, when I read these ladies' bios, I was like, oh my goodness. But, that's just their trajectory and their journey. Yours have to start somewhere. And I don't think wherever you are, you can get to wherever you want to be. Don't think that they're so far ahead, I could never possibly achieve all of that. You may not achieve that, you'll achieve what you want to achieve. And that's what matters in the end.
I don't know if we have time just to ask that, but so my dad, speaking of education, so my dad did not have the opportunity to go to university. He grew up in Jamaica and he did accounting by correspondence. I don't know how many people know what correspondence even is. And so he never finished a university degree. And if you think about he always emphasized education for us. And so if you think about his trajectory where his dad wasn't even educated, he was a goat herder in Jamaica, right? And from Sligoville, middle of nowhere, St. Catherine, Jamaica. You're from Sligoville? So
Yeah.
think about, again, the trajectory for you, but also I believe as a community, the trajectory for your kids and for your family. So to go
Yeah.
from goat herder in Sligoville to then accounting via correspondence, who then became CEO, and now your kids get the opportunity to do X.
Yeah.
2 generations. That's it.
Have we got more time? Can I carry on? Good, good. Because you've moved into our next bit where we wanted to find out a little bit about your background. We know you're all Jamaican, so it'd be good to talk. You talked about St. Catherine. So
Yeah.
just a little bit about who you are or where you're coming from.
Okay, so I mean, I touched upon it a little bit.
Yes.
I will be very honest. I came after the trajectory from my dad. I would say I came from a privileged background. I'm not going to hide that because I think it's important as
Absolutely.
well to place where people start, right? So you can and so I grew up in Jamaica. I went to Harvard, as you know, when I was 17. And I remember going to my guidance counselor. So even with good grades, I went to Campion. And I went to my guidance counselor, and my counselor said to me when I wanted to apply to go to Harvard, he said, "Why waste your family's money?" He's like, "Why waste your period?" This is the guidance counselor, the person who's supposed to be encouraging you to go beyond where you think you can go rather than to hold you back. And because no one at that time had gotten in from Jamaica in 4 years.
Right.
No one had gotten in. And being, I guess, to my younger self, a little bit snooty, I went, "Well, you know what? I'm rebellious. The fact that you told me that I shouldn't try, I am going to try." And I applied and I got into almost every Ivy League school. And that guy couldn't even look at me. And I remember, since it's International Women's Day, I will give a female story. So for Harvard, they interviewed only 2 persons from Jamaica that year, myself and a gentleman, both from the same school. And I remember after the interview, he came up to me and said, "Angela, may the best man win." And so I didn't know I got in at the time. So when I got in afterwards, I saw him and I went, "Well, I guess the best man won." And yeah, so I'll pause because I know we're running out of time, but that's a little bit of my background. But a lot of what I've achieved is through grit, being a bit insensitive, I have to say, try not to take everything to heart, and sometimes too much that way, maybe because of the banking. But yeah.
But I also think, and I don't know, and I'm sure the audience, I think all my formative years were in Jamaica. And I think for me, that was the grounding, because when I came here, I just had the vision that I could do anything and be anything that I wanted to be, because
Yeah.
I didn't have, when I now lecture, most are young people that are born here, a lot of the Black young people that are born here. And I am astounded at how the little confidence that they have in themselves. And I think being born in Jamaica and spending that formative period in Jamaica has set me on what I want.
Yes.
I don't let the color of my skin get in the way.
I would agree with you completely, and not just in the UK, but remember my first degree, I went to school in the US. And even just my experience, my first degree, there would be tables where this is where mainly the Black kids sat. This is where everybody else sat. I mean, and that was, I mean, I'm not that old, but I'm not that young either. But to put into context, that's like in the late 90s going into 2000s, right? Where you still had that, and it was self-segregation. It wasn't a forced segregation. So I have not lived the experience of being born here or being Black in this country, nor in the United States. So I cannot comment on that narrative. I have empathy for that narrative because I do think it's a different experience that you have. And I see it even amongst my cousins, where when I went to school in the US, my cousins who grew up in New York, Black men as well. So even the men, Black men have a different narrative to being a Black woman. And when I'm there going to school at Harvard, and he's saying the man is against me. And I was like, "What do you mean the man is against you? What man is against you?" He says the US, you're the man. And because I didn't have that, I couldn't relate, but I understand what he's saying, and I wouldn't deny that is his experience. But yes, that did definitely make a difference.
Janet, tell us a little bit about who Janet is. We know, especially coming from the Met, we have a perception. So it would be nice for you to kind of
Yes,
debunk that.
so, my parents both in Jamaica, my dad's from St. Elizabeth, my mum from Westmoreland, neighbouring
Yeah.
parishes, you know,
Yes.
looking
Yes,
over the
they
fence. So yeah, my mum, my father passed when I was 3. So my mum brought up 5 of us on her own, and I guess that was no mean feat in terms of, you know, the period of time that she was having to bring us up. So a lot of my grit and determination is absolutely, and she gave me a really fantastic grounding around, you know, finances, and around just being independent, you know, because I couldn't really rely on her because she was busy working. We were latchkey kids, as they say, you know, when you come in from school, you had your own key to get in the house, and sit down there and have your food and stuff. So a lot of my mum's grit and determinations has not just me, but also my siblings as well. So there wasn't a privilege there. If I say that a lot of my own grit and determinations has been invested in my daughter, who's born here. I mean, I was born here as well, but she was born here. So she is 39, and has, for me, achieved a lot more, but that's what I want for her, to achieve more than I have. So she has 2 more degrees than I have, because I don't have a degree. But she has 2 more degrees than I have. But again, you know, she's for me progressing, just building on what is already there. She's married to a Ugandan. I don't even know where that came from, but anyway, no. But again, it's all good in terms of, you know, understanding where we are from as a people. Yeah. So my grandson, who is now 4, has this really unique mix. And it really is great to just see him. And in terms of my own, so again, that whole degree thing, I was like, right, I've finished work, I can retired from work, you know, I've got the means, I can go to, and that was the plan actually when I retired, to go to university and do a degree. But having the grandson come along, actually I thought, no, it's better off invested in him, for him to build his career, because it's still challenging for young people. As you said, the confidence level that they have being born here isn't what you would bring with you if you were coming from somewhere else. And they don't necessarily understand or see the opportunities that we have here. But when you're coming from somewhere else and you've not had that, then those opportunities are just glaring in your face and you're grabbing at them. So for me, it's about, again, just passing that on. So yeah, it's sort of like he's being sort of molded, I guess, now to kind of carry that baton on. So yeah, that's
So you've got 1 grandchild.
With a second due in May.
Oh,
a little girl.
No,
No, I don't like my grandson.
no, I know. I got 2 boys, and then the little girl, she is just completely spoiled because she's the baby. And I was saying to her not so long ago, oh, my baby granddaughter, and my son was like, and your last. So you're not having any more, because his sister, who's the oldest one, hasn't got any children. And he says, because she ain't having none, and this is my last. So you might think it's your last, you're not having any more.
And it's nice to have one of these.
It's like wonderful, like great. Cordella, tell us a little bit about you, Cordella.
Well, I'm a hybrid. So, because I was born in Jamaica and I came here when I was 4 years old.
Okay.
And I think I sort of ended up probably doing immigration, because I came just before they changed immigration laws to stop the children coming over in 1962. So I sort of came over a few months before Jamaica became independent and lost my citizenship. But I think I came here to join my parents who are already here. And I think that actually did shape a lot of who I am. And in terms of what I did and the determination to just do things for myself. And I'm very much a do for myself. So all my education was here in the UK. coincidentally, I went to a Jewish junior school, which is very random at the time, but it meant that whilst my parents didn't have money or come from, I had a really good primary education, very good primary education, and went to a grammar school. And I think in terms of, so I didn't really see much distinction growing up. You know, at home, it was all black, it was Jamaican, primarily Jamaican, definitely Caribbean. School, it was all white. But particularly, I didn't feel that different because in terms of the education, I was getting the same education as other people, might not have actually took much advantage of it, the advantage I ought to have taken at the time. But it was really when I then got to thinking about what I want to do later on, that's when you started to see the disparity in terms of what information you were getting and what information your white peers were getting. So when they were talking about prospectuses to go to university, I didn't know what a prospectus was. No one ever told me what it was. They're applying to go to places. I don't know where these places are. And also, even if I did know, where's the money going to come from for me to go to these places as well? And so that's when you then started seeing, and as I said, coming back to as a real, that the equity part of it, that the education I had ought to have propelled me to the same places, going to, you know, to the universities, people in my class going to Cambridge, but no one saying to me, you could try. So when I said I think I decided on law by a process of elimination, that I didn't like blood, so it wasn't going to be nursing or medicine. And I thought I couldn't count. I can actually, but I thought I couldn't count. So it wasn't going to be accountancy, but I always knew that I wanted a profession. I knew I wanted a profession where I'm independent and I can work for myself and do things for myself. And that was law. And the other thing as well, growing up at that time, and again, this was where sort of the human rights element came from, because I'm in a society where I was very much a minority, but I'm seeing on television all the stuff that's going on in the world, because the time of the civil rights movement in the States, you've got the apartheid in South Africa, you've got the independence struggles going on, and I was a voracious reader because I sort of didn't really then, I was sort of trying to understand where I fitted in all of this, because I knew I'm from Jamaica, I'm not hearing about this place. One of the first books I would go to the library, and I remember one of the first books I took out, must have been about 6 or so, was A High Wind in Jamaica. Thinking it was about Jamaica, it was about pirates in Cornwall. You know, it was that, I think it was just that I always had this very, very strong sense of being from Jamaica. So when I'm told that sugar beet comes from somewhere up in the north of England, and that's what the foundation of this country is, thinking no, it's cane fields. Yes, I don't remember cane fields. So it was always that questioning what I was being told as well, at the same time as I'm going through. So I had a very standard education, but it was one I was questioning. And so when I was told, when I said I wanted to do law, because I saw the impact that lawyers were making and where they fitted in the whole civil rights movements going on, and a lot of the leaders of those movements have a legal background, that's what I wanted to do. And so I was told, in fact, that because I was a woman, I couldn't be a lawyer. So it was one of those where they didn't say the color, even though I knew that my female white friends were going to do law, but I was told that I couldn't, that, you know, it's too hard, wouldn't be able to do it. I should consider shop work, the usual thing I think that a lot of us go through. But I was just determined that that's what I was going to do. And so, and then because I wanted that independence, I always knew I wanted to have my own firm. I wanted to do the work I want to do. Didn't want to be a small cog in a big wheel. I had all of that, and also desperately wanted to go back to Jamaica. Up until I was in my, I'd qualified as a lawyer here. I was still trying to get into law school in Jamaica. So by the time that they actually gave me a place, I was already. Yeah, I've set up my own firm here now, so not going anywhere, but it was that. And I think sometimes, my siblings are all, I'm the eldest and I've got 3 siblings, and we sort of talked about sometimes the differences in attitudes that we have, because we have noticed there is even though it's only those 4 years that I had there, in terms of my thinking and my attitudes and resilience, it is different. And also, I think also it's given, knowing that I was born there gives me a sense of knowing where I belong. And I think that's the thing that is lost. And when I see younger people here, I think that's one of the things. One of the things I'm pleased to see actually is my son, his friends, a lot of younger people, they're all going to visit Jamaica now, or they're wherever, or whatever island or wherever they're from, they are going now. There is that interest, which I don't think was there sort of 20 years ago. There was not that interest, whereas there is a very strong, and I think it is almost a reaction to how they're seeing things here, that there is that need to connect somewhere. And I think that's what I grew up with, that connection. And
I think it's that it's your roots, it's the grounding.
Yeah.
And I really believe that being born in Jamaica means that I know, and I'll say categorically and confidently, well, I'm a Jamaican.
Yeah.
Well, because I don't need to. My kids are like they're both their parents, but my husband and I are both of Jamaican parents. We came from Jamaica, we were born in Jamaica, came here as kids. But at least we can confidently say we're Jamaican. They get this, my son will still say he's Jamaican, you can go, he's not, I'm sorry. Whether he likes it or not, he's not. But I think they need to have some sense of roots, of where to be able to say categorically, I'm confident of where I'm from. And if you don't, whether you accept that I'm British, or if I say I'm British and you're saying, well, you're not like Port and Ghosty, where are you from? When you can say categorically, well, this is where I'm from. I don't need no explanation. I don't need to keep asking you because I know what where you're getting at, and pretend that I don't know what you're getting at. But I know you want to know when you say where are you from. Really, you say I'm from Lewisham, and they say, no, where are you from?
Really from.
And when you get to the point is where are your people from? Now we're at a different level together. So I can confident. So I think it does make a difference in terms of how you are able to progress in life, because you don't have that other baggage to be worrying about. You can be confident and just, move on. We're kind of pretty much there, because we're gonna have a poem, and it's Phenomenal Woman, wow, by Maya Angelou, and it's gonna be read by Miss Angela Edwards.
First of all, let me say thank you to the phenomenal woman on the panel this evening. I'm sure we've all enjoyed the discussion. And thank you so much for all of you who are here with us this evening and online for joining us on International Women's Day. And I'm paying tribute to all women, and by reading this poem to you from a truly amazing woman, Maya Angelou, called Phenomenal Woman. I'm taking a little bit of an advantage here with this, maybe, and going beyond just outward appearance. So we're looking at the essence of woman. Pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size. But when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I'm a woman, phenomenal woman, that's me. I walk into a room, cool as you please, and to a man the fellas stand or fall down on their knees. Then they swarm around me like a hive of honeybees. I say, it's a fire in my eyes, and the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist, and the joy in my feet. I'm a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. When I try to show them, they say they still can't see. We all know that. I say it's in the arch of my back, the sun of my smile, the ride of my breast, the grace of my style. I'm a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump about or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, ought to make you proud. I say, it's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hand, the need for my care, because I'm a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. Phenomenal woman, that's you. Phenomenal woman, that's we. Now, all that leaves me to do is to thank these phenomenal women who were our panelists tonight. Janet, thank you so much. Angela and Cordella. And can we just please give a one round of applause? It's been an absolute honor and a privilege, and I hope that you've all gained something from tonight, and those who are watching at home have enjoyed the session and have also gained something from these incredible women. And I think it's a fitting way for the High Commission to celebrate International Women's Day with three just magnificent, wonderful Jamaican women. So thank you very much.